available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the directives from the Board of Internal Economy regarding masking and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. A reminder that all comments by members or witnesses should be addressed through the chair. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. With regard to a speaking list, as always, the committee clerk and myself will do the very best we can to maintain the order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on March 23rd, 2021, the committee will now begin its study of the government's response to the Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752 tragedy. I would first like to introduce and welcome our witnesses. First off, we have the Honorable Ralph Goodale. Ralph, welcome back. Ralph is the High Commissioner for Canada and in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and Special Advisor to the Prime Minister on PS 752. We also have with us the Canadian Coalition Against Terror, Aidan Fishman, Legal Counsel, and we have the Canadian Transportation Accident Investigation and Safety Board, Kathleen Fox, the Chair, Natasha Van Themps, the Director, Air Investigations, Ewan Tasker, Manager, International Operations and Major Investigations. From the Privy Council Office, we have Jeff Jaworski, Forensic Examination and Assessment Team. These will be the witnesses between 3:30 and 4:45. At 4:45 to 5:30, we have the Association of Families of Flight PS 752 victims. We have Hamad Asamalan, President and Spokesperson. We have Emirali Alavi, Representative, and Karash Dustinashanas, Representative. And if I did not pronounce your names properly, I very much apologize. So with that, we're going to start off with our witnesses. Each witness will have 10 minutes to present. And with that, Mr. Clerk, are we going 5 minutes or 10 minutes? 5 minutes. Good. Okay. We'll go each because we have quite a few witnesses here, and I'm sure questions will be imminent. So with that, we're going to start off for 5 minutes, and just a note: when you see my hand go up, that means you're on your last minute. So with that, the Honorable Ralph Goodale. Ralph, welcome back. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Well, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you very much. I join you today from Cornwall in the United Kingdom, where G7 leaders are gathering this weekend for their annual summit. Those activities notwithstanding, I am very pleased to participate in this important discussion about the horrific behavior of Iran, which destroyed Ukraine International Airlines Flight PS 752 and killed so many innocent people, including so many with links to Canada. Early last year, the Prime Minister asked me to assist with the government's response. I began that task on March 31st, 2020, and it continues today along my duties as Canada's High Commissioner in the United Kingdom. I was asked to do three things. First, to assist ministers and public servants in responding to the myriad needs of the grieving families of the victims. Second, to catalog the best practices to be mobilized in response to tragedies like this, so such information is readily available to help deal with any future crises. And third, to make suggestions for how the world can best prevent these awful circumstances from happening again. In the course of this work, I consulted repeatedly with the families. They are courageous, resourceful, insightful, unfailingly gracious and generous, knowledgeable and astute. I also listened to families who lost loved ones in other international air disasters, such as the bombing of Air India Flight 182 and the MAX 8 crash of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. In addition, I engaged with more than 15 departments and agencies of the Government of Canada and a high caliber roster of external experts, such as Professors Paya Makavan, Thomas Juneau, and Craig Forsays, among others, as well as Dutch officials leading the Netherlands' lengthy and dogged response to the 2014 attack on Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 over the Russian border. The results of this work were published last December in my report entitled Flight PS752, The Long Road to Transparency, Accountability, and Justice. Let me summarize just a few main points. First, the title. Why is it such a long road? The answer lies in the large, complex, multinational nature of this tragedy, the complicated maze of international conventions and practices that need to be navigated with precision, the limited roles of organizations like ICAO, and the brutal intransigence of Iran. Among other things, I have recommended significant changes in the international legal framework to ensure that culpable nations are not put in charge of investigating disasters which they themselves have caused. Secondly, in my view, Iran's management of this tragedy has been deliberately evasive and deceptive. For 72 hours at the outset, they denied any state or military involvement when they knew that wasn't true. They admit the destruction of PS752 was the result of military interference, but then they refuse to conduct a transparent and comprehensive investigation of that very military interference. They also stonewall dozens of critical questions which Canada and the world have asked. Third, beyond being denied full and honest answers, the families have been treated abhorrently by Iran. In some cases, the personal effects of their loved ones have been vandalized, lost, or stolen. Their funerals and memorials have been disrupted or distorted. They've been targets of intimidation and harassment. Such abuse is simply inexplicable and unforgivable. Fourth, in my opinion, Iran's conduct was grossly incompetent. Witness their deeply flawed risk assessment, the claim that everything was quite safe in Tehran's airspace that morning. They were reckless. Witness the outrageous decision to keep that airspace open despite their own very recent missile strikes on Iraq and their full expectation of retaliation. And they showed wanton disregard for human life. Witness their failure to tell commercial airlines that hostilities were underway, and those airlines were actually under surveillance by IRGC missile operators with their fingers on the triggers. Fifth, Iran has displayed an attitude of impunity, divorced from any remorse or responsibility for their deadly conduct. They were bulldozing the crash site within just a few hours. They delayed downloading the black boxes for months on end. Even now, they say if they had that faulty risk assessment to do over again, they would come to the same conclusion. They produced a late and shambolic safety report without a shred of hard evidence, and their criminal investigation remains secret and hypothetical. Yes, the families should be outraged, and so should the entire international community. We have not been told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And without that, no one can or should feel at all safe or secure in the still dangerous skies over Iran. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Goodale. We're now going to move on to the Canadian Coalition Against Terror. We have with us Mr. Aidan Fishman. Mr. Fishman, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
I'm honored to testify here today before this committee on behalf of the Canadian Coalition Against Terror, also known as CCAT. CCAT was founded by Canadian terror victims in 2004 and is a non-partisan research and policy group committed to seeking innovative legal and public policy strategies in the fight against terrorism and extremism. On January 8th, 2020, UIA flight PS752 was blown out of the sky by operatives of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC. 176 people were murdered, including around 55 Canadian citizens and 138 people in total who were flying to Canada. It was the second deadliest terror attack in history against Canadians, after only the Air India bombing of 1985. In fact, more Canadians died aboard PS 752 than on 9/11. Almost 3 years ago today, the House of Commons overwhelmingly adopted a motion calling on the Government of Canada to immediately designate the IRGC as a listed terrorist entity under the Criminal Code. On May 20th of this year, the Ontario Superior Court of Justice handed down a decision in which it found that the IRGC had committed an intentional act of terrorism by shooting down UIA flight PS 752. And once advised on the correct procedure, I would like to table a copy of that decision before this committee after my remarks. CCAT stands firmly with the victims of this atrocity and their family members, and believes that the best immediate and concrete way to stand in solidarity with them right now is to designate the IRGC as a terrorist entity in line with the will of the House of Commons. In light of the facts that I've outlined, we believe that the onus is on anyone who opposes this move to justify their opposition. But nonetheless, I want to address some of the points that have been raised here and there in objection to this step. Firstly, it has been said by some that there is no need for this step because the Quds Force, which is the external operations arm of the IRGC, is already listed as a terrorist entity. But the House resolution that I mentioned explicitly called for the IRGC as a whole to be listed, and it was passed after the Quds Force had already been listed. So clearly the intent was to refer to the entire IRGC. Secondly, the recent Ontario court judgment that I mentioned specifically finds that the IRGC operating in Iran, rather than specifically the Quds Force, was responsible for this act of terrorism. And the government ought to honor that court decision. Finally, in other cases, Canada has rightly rejected the artificial distinction between different wings of the same organization when it comes to other listed terrorist entities such as Hamas and Hezbollah. There is no reason to not follow that precedent in this case as well. It said that the IRGC cannot or should not be listed as a terrorist entity because it is part of the armed forces of a state, namely Iran. But in reality, this can't be a real barrier because, as I said, the Quds Force is already listed and the Quds Force is a part of the IRGC, meaning that it also is part of the state apparatus. And Iran itself, in addition, is already designated as a state sponsor of terrorism pursuant to the State Immunity Act. Moreover, to give another example, Hamas was not removed as a designated terrorist entity when it won Palestinian elections in 2006 and became part of the Palestinian government. And the same is true with respect to Hezbollah, which has been part of the Lebanese government for a number of years. In fact, it would be completely illogical if being part of the state apparatus somehow prevented Canada from designating a group as a terrorist entity, because if that was true, it would actually create a perverse incentive for countries like Iran to incorporate terrorist proxies into the state apparatus, which is the opposite of what we should want. In conclusion, it is CCAT's position that none of the arguments against listing the IRGC as a terrorist group, consistent with the court ruling, consistent with the will of the House of Commons, hold any water. We believe that the government should act and should designate the IRGC as a whole as a terrorist entity as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. We're now going to move on to the Canadian Transportation Accident Investigation and Safety Board. We'll start off with Kathleen Fox, the chair. Ms. Fox, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, and I will be the only one speaking for the TSB during the opening remarks. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear today to explain the role of the TSB in Iran's safety investigation into the downing of Ukraine International Airlines flight PS 752. Since the morning of this tragic event that killed so many Canadians and others with ties to Canada, we have been fully engaged in doing as much as possible to find out what happened, why it happened, and what needs to change to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. In the case of international safety investigations, ICAO's Annex 13 prescribes the roles of participating countries, including which state has the right to lead the investigation and which other states may participate and to what extent. It should be noted that a safety investigation is not intended to attribute blame or determine civil or criminal liability. Now, from the beginning, Iran offered the TSB more access to its investigation activities than we were technically entitled to, albeit less than what we asked for. For example, 2 TSB investigators, one of whom is with us here today, spent 6 days in Tehran following the crash. En juillet dernier,
in July of last year, our expert and a TSB recorder specialist attended the readout of the aircraft's flight recorders in Paris.
In early February of this year, Ukraine invited us to provide technical assistance, giving us access to the draft investigation report for review and comments. Throughout this process, we have specifically and repeatedly asked Iran's Aircraft Accident Investigation Board to answer 3 important questions. First, what was the sequence of events, including the technical, human, and organizational factors that led to the missiles being fired that brought down PS-752? Second, why was Iran's airspace kept open during a period of heightened military alert? And finally, why did civilian airlines continue to operate in Iran's airspace in the hours following the launch of missiles into Iraq? Last March, we shared our independent perspective publicly on how these 3 questions were addressed in the final report. Iran concluded that PS-752 was shot down because an air defense unit mistook the Boeing 737 as a threat and claimed that this misidentification occurred because of a misalignment of the missile launcher's radar. However, Iran has provided no evidence to date to support this scenario. As to why the airspace remained open, Iran generally explained the risk assessment process and limited mitigation that its civilian authorities took in coordination with the military following their launch of missiles into Iraq. However, Iran did not completely close its airspace to civilian aircraft. And finally, Iran did not publish any notices as recommended by ICAO to warn aircraft operators of the hazards associated with Iran's state of heightened military alert until after PS-752 was shot down. Ukraine International Airlines was not the only airline to continue operating after Iran launched missiles against Iraq. 8 other aircraft departed Tehran before the shootdown of PS-752. We consider that Iran's final investigation report raises more questions than it answers. The report does not explain any of the underlying factors behind why the missiles were launched at 752, their cause of this tragedy.
In short, the report says what happened, but doesn't address the why this happened.
We know this has been very difficult for the families. And in the end, no safety investigation report can ever bring back those who are lost. Much concern has been expressed about the international protocols that govern these very unique types of safety investigations involving military activities, and specifically the issue of the state of occurrence investigating itself. Now that Iran's safety investigation has concluded, the TSB has begun acting on its commitment to advocate for a review of the provisions of ICAO Annex 13 so that families and the public can have confidence in the findings and recommendations from these very unique investigations. Last month, we submitted a working paper to the ICAO Accident Investigation Group panel, calling for the examination of conflict of interest situations following an event where the state is directly involved in the downing of a civilian aircraft, and for the consideration of how the ICAO standards, recommended practices, or guidance may be improved to reinforce the independence of future investigations and improve their integrity, transparency, and credibility. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we'd be pleased to take your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. We're now going to move on to the Privy Council office. Mr. Jeff Jaworski, Forensic Examination Assessment Team. Jeff, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to support your study into the downing of Flight PS752. In October 2020, the Honorable Francois Philippe Champagne, the then Minister of Foreign Affairs, announced the formation of a Canadian Forensic Examination and Assessment Team, the Forensic Team. I am honored to be leading such important work. Our task is to uncover how and why Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752 was shot down by Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps near Tehran on January 8, 2020. Iran's account of events has consistently lacked transparency, credibility, and completeness. Significant questions remain surrounding the circumstances and causes of the tragedy. The families of the victims of Flight PS752 are rightly skeptical of Iran's intentions and actions. Iran's lack of transparency is deeply troubling. Its official account of events is dishonest, misleading, superficial, and deliberately ignores key factors. Iran refuses to provide answers to key questions. The families who lost loved ones to this terrible tragedy deserve answers to these many unanswered questions. It is my hope that our work will help in this regard. I report to Vincent Rigby, the National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister. Since our creation, the forensic team has been hard at work to examine, organize, and analyze all available information, evidence, and intelligence about the Flight PS752 disaster and advise the government on its credibility and probative value. The forensic team was tasked with preparing an unclassified report on the circumstances and causes of the shootdown. It will assessment of the tragedy based on all information, evidence, and intelligence available to the Government of Canada. Thankfully, it has been a whole of government effort. Dedicated representatives from all relevant Government of Canada departments and agencies have supported us. The work is complicated and sensitive. Sifting through mountains of data, working with our allies, and declassifying intelligence where possible while protecting sources has proven to be a time-consuming and labor-intensive undertaking. That said, the families and loved ones of the victims have always been central to our efforts, and we owe it to them to get it right. Our report will not, however, answer all outstanding questions. Only Iran has full access to the evidence, the crash site, witnesses, and those ultimately responsible. It therefore remains incumbent upon Iran to provide a full and credible accounting of the events so that the world may finally know the truth about what happened to PS752. While we have not been able to release our report yet, I will outline what I can, in particular as it relates to the victims' families. I met with the families very early in my mandate and started an important dialogue. We also set up a dedicated email address for families to use to provide investigative leads that they felt were significant. We have since received information of value to our investigative efforts. The Association of Families of Flight PS752 victims also set up its own fact-finding committee, which has provided investigative leads to the forensic team, including suggestions on the surface-to-air missile system and its operator, as well as information regarding other flights. We thoroughly investigated all of the material provided and sought to corroborate it with the expansive body of information available to the Canadian government. The forensic team also took great efforts to validate and answer questions from the families wherever possible. I recognize that the gathering of this information by the families came with risks, especially given the actions taken by Iran. Their efforts are truly appreciated, and I want to use this opportunity to thank the families for their contributions. When meeting with the victims' families, I committed that they would have access to the full report before it is made public. Because of this, I will not be able to answer any of the committee's questions on our key findings or any of its content. To do so would be to betray the trust we have developed. I appreciate your understanding of my predicament. I would like to close by expressing my deepest sympathies to the families and loved ones of the victims of Flight PS752. It is my hope that our work will help in some little way on their difficult journey to reconciling their unimaginable grief. The lives lost and potential stolen of the 55 Canadians, 30 permanent residents, and the other passengers and crew of PS752, 176 victims in total, should never be forgotten. Thank you, and I'd now be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jaworski. Members, just a reminder, this panel is from 3:30 to 4:45, and the next panel, the Association of Families of Flight Victims, will begin at 4:45 and ending at 5:30. So with that, we're going to go to our questionnaires, and starting us off for the Conservatives, Ms. Cusi, you have the floor for 5 minutes. I'm sorry, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, High Commissioner Goodale. It's very nice to see you again. As someone who served in the Foreign Service, Canadian Foreign Service for close to 15 years, I hope to follow your path of an expedited head of mission appointment politically one day, but very lovely to see you. Congratulations on that. Please say hi to Sean Blaine, who was my contemporary in the early 2000s. And as well, on a personal note, I'll say please say hi to Art Rial, our mutual family friend. However, High Commissioner Goodale, on June 12, 2018, when you were Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, you voted in favor of a motion in the House of Commons that called on the government to immediately designate the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a listed terrorist entity under the Criminal Code of Canada. Do you still support listing the IRGC as a terrorist entity in Canada?
Mr. Goodale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Cusi. And I will say hello to both of those folks. And I know both of us are thinking very fondly of Art Rial and in his illness. The House of Commons has made clear what its opinion is in this matter. The government has the ultimate responsibility for deciding when and how to proceed with sanctions. As Mr. Fishman has mentioned, there have been sanction measures launched against various elements of the IRGC or surrogate organizations, partly under the Criminal Code, partly under the United Nations Act, and partly under the Special Economic Measures Act. There is also the new legislation that potentially could be used in appropriate circumstances in the Magnitsky type of sanctions that have been proposed. The government will have to make that decision. I would just make 2 points about some factors that will go into that decision. First of all, you need to be absolutely sure of your legal ground so that you don't set up an easy legal challenge, which would be a propaganda victory for the other side. There are legal arguments affecting the use of certain provisions in the law. It would be, I think, incumbent on the government to weigh all of the arguments, including what we've heard this evening or this afternoon from Mr. Fishman. In taking into account all of the pros and cons and making sure you're not giving the other side an easy propaganda win. Secondly, in implementing sanctions, it is prudent, I think, to try very hard to act in concert with other nations so that it's not Canada acting alone, as symbolically important as that could be, but to have a group of countries acting together in concert, making this an international indictment and not just a unilateral indictment. I think all of that's important. But I hear your point. Parliament has expressed its opinion. The government will need to decide.
Thank you. Thank you, High Commissioner. You mentioned Mr. Fishman, who I'll go to next. Mr. Fishman, one of the government's main initiatives in response to the downing of PS 752 was the Safer Skies Initiative, of course, which looks at how to prevent civil aviation accidents in the future in conflict zones. Do you believe that the Safer Skies Initiative addresses prevention strategies so that incidents such as PS 752 do not occur again?
Mr. Fishman.
Thank you so much for the question. It's an excellent question. Certainly, I think all of us, including CCAT, are in favor of any initiative to make the skies safer for civilian aircraft in times of conflict. But the reality is that, as the Ontario Superior Court has now found, based on various reports, all indications really are that this was not an accident. It was not a case of not having the right guidelines in place. And the truth really is that if there was any viable argument or any viable evidence that this disaster was the result of human error or technological malfunction, Iran would have all the interest in the world to prove that to us, to prove that to the international community in a transparent manner. So at this point, all indications are that the attack, the shoot down, was intentional. And as much as it's great to try to prevent accidents in the future, this wasn't an accident. And CCAT's position is that Canada should respond accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Thank you, Chair. So then what actions or initiatives does the Government of Canada need to take to prevent tragedies like PS 752 from happening in the future?
Mr. Fishman.
Thank you again. So, one thing that the Honorable High Commissioner mentioned at the beginning of his remarks is potential Magnitsky sanctions, and that's another measure that certainly could be used in this case to hold some of the individual officials involved with this accountable. And it's something that CCAT certainly supports. The issue with the Magnitsky sanctions, though, targeting individuals, is that even in a dictatorial regime like the one in Iran, the faces and the positions change. So ultimately, even if you hold specific people responsible, you're not holding the broader system and the broader entity that caused the deaths responsible. And that's why it's ultimately our position that the IRGC should be designated as a terrorist entity. I acknowledge, as the Honorable High Commissioner said, the government clearly has to weigh the pros and the cons. But at this point, the pros of listing them are pretty clear, and there seem to be a very small and quickly vanishing list of cons.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kusi. We're now going to move on to the Liberals. Mr. Assassi. Mr. Assassi, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to everyone who's here to testify. I know it's been a difficult year, but certainly everyone who is here has worked very, very hard to hold Iran to account. In particular, I did want to welcome back to Parliament the Honourable Ralph Goodell. Great to see you, Mr. High Commissioner. Now, if I could start off with Ms. Fox. Ms. Fox, as you know, one of your officials arrived in Tehran within days of this terrible tragedy. In your opinion, was your official provided full access to do some investigative work while they were on the ground in Tehran?
Ms. Fox.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask Mr. Tasker to take that question because he was the one who went to Tehran and can speak directly to the matter.
Thank you. Mr. Tasker.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, I was one of the 2 investigators that arrived in Iran in those early days. As Ms. Fox mentioned before, due to the nature of Canada's involvement in that and the expert status, I was aware of the, let's call them documented limitations that would be to my involvement. However, obviously from the moment I arrived, I was pressing for more access, and I was provided with access that did exceed the minimum. So we did visit the site. We did examine the wreckage and photograph it for several days. We did examine extra data and were part of group meetings while we were there. So we were provided with additional information. It wasn't to the extent that I was requesting. Of course, I requested further and further, but it was limited at that point.
Thank you for that. Now, Ms. Fox, as we heard from the High Commissioner, I think it's fair to say that the manner in which Iran has acted has been horrific. It's been brutal. I understand Canada did ask for expert status so we could be more active in this investigation. Is it correct that we officially requested that from the Iranian government?
Ms. Fox.
Mr. Chair, to be clear, we asked for the higher status, which is accredited representative, which provides us more opportunity to contribute to the investigation. That was done by myself in writing on more than one occasion. It was done multiple times by Mr. Tasker, who was in direct contact with the Iranian investigator in charge. And I know that other levels of government, including at the diplomatic level, also made such requests. Iran never formally told us no, but they never gave us the higher status.
Mr. Sassy.
Okay. And then when it came to the black boxes going to Paris for the decoding of that, I suspect that you would have been happy to have a higher status than just an observer. Did you put in a request at that point? And why did Iran officially not allow you to have a more elevated status?
Ms. Fox.
Mr. Chair, in accordance with ICAO Annex 13, experts do not normally participate even as observers in the download analysis of recorders. So the fact that we were able to have somebody there was an extra step for us. But we did not have direct access to the recordings. But no, we asked multiple times, either in writing or in person in the form of Mr. Tasker.
And on every occasion, the Iranians refused to acknowledge it, but they never officially responded. Am I correct?
With respect to, Mr. Chair, with respect to the letters that I sent, I only had a response to one of the 3 letters that I sent. And in response to the request that Mr. Tasker made, we, along with other expert countries such as Sweden and the UK, were not allowed to have direct access to the recordings in Paris.
Mr. Sassy.
Thank you. Now, in your testimony, you referred to the fact that the Ukrainians provided you a copy of the draft final report by Iran. And you took the time to provide them with your observations, and that was sent back to the Iranians. Given your observations, and given the fact that Minister Goodale's report also did refer to all the gaps in the that needed to be answered. If you just had to grade the final Iranian report, what would your grade be?
Ms. Fox.
Mr. Chair, I think it would be oversimplistic to give it a specific grade. The report is incomplete. It doesn't provide proof. It doesn't provide details about what happened or why it happened. And so it falls short of what we would have expected and certainly what the families deserve to hear. And I would just add clarity, our comments were made to Ukraine and then Ukraine submitted our comments to Iran. All of them were provided to Iran, but Iran only dealt with some of them in the actual report and the rest were appended to the end of the report.
And that report that you prepared, is that considered property of the government of Canada or property of the government of Ukraine?
Ms. Fox.
Mr. Chair, the comments that we provided to Ukraine are really Ukraine's to deal with, but we have indicated to Ukraine and to others that we have no issue releasing our comments to the public if requested.
So if we officially requested as Parliament that you table that report, would you have any misgivings?
To be clear, it's not a report. It's really our comments on their safety report, and it would, as long as Ukraine has no objection, we have no objection to releasing our comments.
But you think that unless they actually provide explicit approval, you would not do so?
Well, again, we were appointed as a technical advisor to Ukraine. Therefore, we would want Ukraine to approve the release of our comments to them. But I can assure you, Mr. Chair, that all of our comments were provided to Iran. And I realize you may be running short of time. Mr. Tasker, did you have anything you wanted to add with respect to Iran's treatment of our comments?
No, just some fine details. Some comments were addressed, some that were not addressed were appended, and then some were neither appended nor addressed. And then,
but more importantly, I was wondering if as Parliament, we could have access to your observations. What would prohibit that from happening?
I personally have no problem with it. As we've stated before, we're welcome to release them. I think from a formality perspective, we would request from the Ukraine. However, I am nearly certain the Ukraine would approve that release anyway. So they're easy to get.
Well, thank you, Mr. Assassi. Thank you, Mr. Tasker, and thank you, Ms. Fox. We're now going to move on to the block. Mr. Barrasso-Deval, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank all of the witnesses who are here with us today. It's very good to hear from this particular group of witnesses today for this study, and we've learned a lot. I would like to start with Mr. Goodale, the High Commissioner. We know that for victims, what often counts the most is to have answers, to know what's happened. But we've seen that with Iran, they've been very reticent to provide any information. So I would like to know concretely, in your opinion, what can we do and what are you doing to get information in this context? What actions have you taken to get information from Iran and what methods have you used?
Mr. Goodell?
I think all of us who have dealt with the regime either directly or indirectly over the last year and a half have found information and facts and solid data very difficult to come by. The forensic team that Mr. Jaworski is leading is one of the initiatives created by the Government of Canada in the course of the last 15 months to create a vehicle by which we could at least have some ability to gather information, to gather evidence, to gather intelligence, and to make our own assessment of how credible it all is. And as Mr. Jaworski has explained, that work is ongoing, and as soon as he is in a position to do so, he will present that information to the families. That's one way to further the quest for the truth. And we certainly haven't got to, as I said in my remarks, the whole truth and nothing but the truth yet. There's further work to be done. The second element of this is the work that the Government of Canada is now taking as part of the International Coordination and Response Group of countries. That is Canada, Ukraine, the United Kingdom, Sweden, and to a certain extent Afghanistan, although Afghanistan is preoccupied with some other issues domestically in that country at this moment. But the coordination group has served notice of their claim against Iran. They have specified the things that they will be seeking in negotiations for reparations. It's a lengthy list of demands on behalf of these countries. But one of the things, and perhaps from the point of view of many of the families, the single most important thing, more than money or compensation or whatever, the single most important thing is a demand to get from Iran the truth about what happened. And in those reparations negotiations, you'll have 5 countries, 4 of them actually at the table, Canada, Ukraine, Sweden, and the United Kingdom, demanding those answers in the course of these reparations discussions. If those countries are not satisfied with Iran's answers, then they have an opportunity to make an appeal to the dispute settlement mechanism under the International Civil Aviation Organization. And if they're not satisfied with the result there, then they have the ability to appeal even further to the International Court of Justice. This is a complicated process. We have to make sure that every step is properly taken in the right sequence so that we don't mess up jurisdiction. But the Government of Canada, in concert with those other victim countries, is intent on pursuing this search for the truth relentlessly until we get some degree of satisfaction far higher than exists today.
Thank you, High Commissioner. Mr. Brasso-Devell?
Yes, thank you. I've listened to the witnesses, Mr. Tasker and Ms. Fox earlier, who were saying that finally we were able to get access, but more access than we might have done under Canada's status. So I would like to know if the fact that we had access to more than we might have expected has led us to maybe put less pressure on Iran because they gave us some increased access. Are we still putting as much pressure on as we could and not risking losing that access? Well, Mr. Chair, I could say that we have not hesitated to make demands to have access and better access to the investigation. However, the roles are very well set out by ICAO, and So Iran gave us more access than we technically had a right to, but that has not prevented us from making demands many times at several different levels to have greater access to the process that's underway. All right, but my question was more, is there additional pressure that we would have put on Iran if we had not had that additional access that we initially had? Well, Mr. Chair, we felt that it was important to follow the protocols under ICAO Annex 13 to ensure that we weren't thrown out of the investigation, if you will. And we participate in 100 or 200 investigations a year, so we've, followed the protocols that we've had the right to follow under Annex 13. But that's what shows us that Annex 13 needs to be reviewed and changed, and that's why we have made submissions to ICAO to have that changed for the future. Because countries like Canada, who have lost citizens, we want to make sure that they have greater access to investigations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fox and High Commissioner Goodale. We're now going to move on to the NDP. Mr. Bachrach, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses here today. I'd like to begin with some questions for High Commissioner Goodale. And let me begin by offering my congratulations on your new role, and really appreciate you being with the committee today to answer our questions. You mentioned in your introductory remarks, High Commissioner, that now that you've submitted your report, your role as a special advisor does continue. I wonder if you could characterize what shape that role is taking now that your report has been submitted, how much capacity you'll be dedicating to that role, and what some of your objectives are moving forward.
Mr. Goodale?
Well, I think the idea here is for me to continue to be available to the families on one side and to the government on the other, to ensure that the communication remains strong and robust, that the relationship that has been built up over the last year and a half is carefully nurtured. I would mention, though, one new and very impressive member of the team that was just announced the other day, maybe a week or 10 days ago, and that is Professor Payam Akavan, who is an acknowledged human rights expert. He has an international reputation. He's an Iranian Canadian of great academic distinction and legal distinction in Canada. We're very lucky to have him as a citizen of our country. He's a very wise counselor and a very strategic thinker in how you navigate all of the international agencies and rules and procedures and conventions to get justice properly served at the end of the day. And he has now just been engaged as a senior special advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs on the PS 752 case specifically. And I look forward to working in close concert with Professor Akavan to offer ideas, counsel, advice to assist in this endeavor going forward.
Mr. Bachrach?
Thank you for the response, High Commissioner. Now, Iran has indicted 10 officials. It holds responsible for the shooting down. Yes. Do you accept that these 10 officials are the ones who are responsible, or is this a case of the blame being placed on junior officials so that responsibility can be avoided by more senior officials who probably should have taken additional actions to secure the airspace for civil aviation?
That's the dilemma, Mr. Bachrach, in a nutshell. We don't know. The process by which these people were identified, investigated, indicted, charged, tried, if they have been, we don't know what process, We heard first it was 6, and then it was something more than 6, and then it was 10. It's all a black box. The judicial system is entirely opaque, and therefore, how can you ever know if justice has been properly served? And when you're dealing with a regime that does not have an independent air accident investigation system, and that is the case in Iran. It's an integrated part of the government. It's not an independent investigative body like our Transportation Safety Board, for example. Kathy Fox and her team are entirely independent of the government of Canada. But in Iran, that's not the case. The investigation is in effect a part of their Department of Transport. Similarly, the judicial system is entirely opaque. You don't know who's being charged with what and what the process is to determine their guilt or innocence. So the short answer to your question is, when you've got that kind of a regime, you're always going to have serious doubts about whether you're ever getting the truth.
Mr. Bachrach.
Thank you, High Commissioner. Now, the Iranian government has offered to provide compensation to the families, and that offer was rejected. Could you speak to why that offer of compensation was deemed insufficient? And I believe you spoke to reparations earlier, but perhaps you could just confirm that government will be seeking compensation for the victims' families.
Mr. Goodale.
Yes, on 2 occasions, the Iranian government has offered reparations, or offered compensation. One was in the days immediately after the truth was revealed. You remember the Prime Minister's news conference where he indicated that intelligence made it abundantly clear what had happened. PS 752 had been shot down by Iranian missiles. In the wake of that disclosure by the Prime Minister, Iran admitted its responsibility, said there would be an investigation, said there would be prosecutions, and said there would be compensation. That was useful. That was a step forward in the first few days after the incident happened. And then earlier this year, they unilaterally came forward with an offer, if you will, or at least a speculated offer of a certain amount of money per victim. The point is that they don't get to decide compensation unilaterally. They have committed an internationally wrongful act. The international conventions, the traditions of international law will say that they are obliged to engage in negotiations with the injured countries. I've specified earlier what countries those are. And it's those negotiations that will determine what the appropriate amount of compensation is. Yes, the negotiations for reparations will seek appropriate compensation right up to the high standards of the world. And we will insist on that being properly recognized. But it will come out of the negotiating process. It's not something that Iran can dictate unilaterally.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Thank you, Mr. Goodale. We're now going to go on to our second round. First up for the Conservatives, Mr. Shipley. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. I'll start with Mr. Goodale. First of all, thank you for being here today, and nice to meet you, Mr. Goodale. Too bad it's not in person, but I think someday soon we'll be back to that. Mr. Goodale, I just, in your opening remarks, I'm going to quote you a little bit. You mentioned the horrific behavior of Iran. Just to get on the record, perhaps obviously other than the blatant issue of shooting down Flight 752, could you expand on what you mean a little bit more about that so we can get a clear indication of some of your knowledge on this?
Mr. Goodale,
please.
A lot of that behavior, Mr. Shipley, is laid out in some considerable detail in the report that I filed, and I won't get into all of that detail. Let me give you a few examples. Iran was launching missile attacks at U.S. positions in Iraq in the early morning of January the 8th, 2020. And they say they conducted a risk assessment. This is in their final report. to determine whether any particular action should be taken to protect civil aviation in Iran. They took some actions to control air travel in the extreme west part of the country, where the border occurs with Iraq. But the airspace over the bulk of Iran had no restrictions or limitations whatsoever. The only change that they made was to have the military involved in decisions as to whether or not a flight would be cleared to take off. That's the only safety measure that they implemented. Otherwise, they said the skies over Tehran are safe as normal on that morning. Well, that was a clearly flawed risk assessment. Obviously, they did not anticipate the circumstances that occurred. And yet they say in their report, if they had to do it over again, they would come to the same conclusion. Clearly, that was an incredibly incompetent behavior to produce a risk assessment that was so fundamentally flawed. And then, knowing the risk, knowing that they had launched missiles, knowing that retaliation was expected, knowing that they had positioned those mobile missile launchers around Tehran, including by the airport, they didn't bother to close airspace over the airport. They didn't bother to alert the airline companies to the fact that there was danger in those skies, and that there were missile operators in a position with their, quite literally, with their fingers over the triggers, ready and able to shoot down civilian aircraft. That's just a bit of the flavor of this horrendous conduct. They were, in my opinion, incredibly incompetent. They were reckless, and they showed a wanton disregard for human life.
Mr. Shipley.
Thank you, Mr. Goodale. You've always got a wealth of knowledge on this file. Knowing what you know and the breadth of knowledge that you have on this, do you feel that Canada should or could impose more sanctions on Iran under any federal or international legislation?
I think the government needs to keep all of the options open and pursue this whole issue in a step-by-step manner, strategically, going forward, hopefully not alone, hopefully in concert with other like-minded countries who would hold the same opinion that we would hold, but meticulously not ruling out any potential measure to hold Iran to account. The critical thing at the moment is to make sure that the reparation negotiations get properly started, because that's another forum in which we'll pursue the truth to try to get Iran to answer the questions. But while that is going forward, Canada should, in my view, be raising this issue in every forum, at ICAO, in other agencies of the United Nations, through every channel and means, to make sure that the world does not forget. And let me just put together a troika of events that show the slippery slope you're on. You can get on. Back in 2014, we had the MH17 that was shot down over the Russian border. That prompted a series of reflection by ICAO and other bodies about what you could do to improve air safety. 5.5 years later, you have PS752 being shot down by Iran. And now, just what was it, a month ago, the Ryanair incident, where an aircraft was what appears to be state-sponsored hijacking. The world needs to take this seriously. There is no reason for anyone to believe that the skies over Tehran are any safer today than they were in January of 2020. Canada needs, with the rest of the world cooperating and collaborating, to make it abundantly clear that we aren't going to forget, and we're not going to let the world forget, that 55 Canadian citizens, 30 permanent residents of Canada, and another 53 or 54 innocent people with direct connections to Canada lost their lives on that horrendous morning. That is something that Canadians will never forget.
Thank you, High Commissioner. And thank you, Mr. Shipley. We're now going to move on to the Liberals. Ms. Jacek, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for your testimony, which has been extremely clear and very forthright as well. My community was horrified to learn that all 3 members of the Rahimi family perished in the shooting down of PS 752. And at the vigil at the town of Whitchurch Stouffville held for them, it was really obvious that they had become such well-loved members of the community. And it was incredibly moving to hear from residents in my community how such exemplary Canadian citizens had been shot down. So my first question is to Ms. Fox. You intrigued me in one thing that you said, that there had been 8 previous flights that left Tehran Airport prior to PS 752. Did you ask the question, I'm sure you did, how did the radar system somehow misalign simply prior to 752? Was there any explanation how others had left the airport safely and this particular flight was subject to being shot down?
Ms. Fox.
Mr. Chair, to be clear, the 8 aircraft that departed was after Iran launched missiles into Iraq, and Iran's report suggests a scenario whereby the radar had been offline for a certain period of time. We were not able to obtain any additional information to validate that one way or the other.
Thank you. In terms of ICAO's Annex 13, Ms. Fox, if you were to rewrite the conditions around investigations, what would they look like if you had the ability to change them?
Ms. Fox.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask Mr. Tasker to take that question because he was the one who presented the paper at ICAO last month.
Mr. Tasker.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. So as mentioned, what we proposed in our working paper is that the Accident Investigation Group panel, which is a panel of worldwide experts in accident investigation, come together to answer those questions. We have ideas. I have ideas. Ms. Fox has ideas. Our team has ideas in ways to bolster independence, to bolster credibility, to bolster transparency. There's many methods to do that, whether there's different grades of who gets accredited representative status and et cetera, possibly. So there's many ideas that we can do to help aid that. But what we determined was that it would be best if those ideas come from that group of experts. If they get pushed by us singularly, they may not get as much traction and have as much success.
Thank you. Ms. Jacek.
Thank you. And now to High Commissioner Goodale. In terms of our diplomatic efforts, is there any danger in Canada using rhetoric that might be too inflammatory? I really appreciate your forthrightness today, but how are you balancing the risks?
Mr. Goodale.
Well, that's part of the art of diplomacy. And I guess as someone who was actively involved in the political life of Canada for some 45 or 50 years, I'm still on a learning curve of transitioning from politics to diplomacy. But I think it is important to be absolutely clear about what we feel about the culpability that's involved in this situation. So I think strong language is important. It has to be accurate, but I think we have to leave no doubt that Canadians feel very strongly about the deaths of 138 people who were attached in one way or another to our country. Secondly, I think we have to work very hard to make sure, whether it's on the issue of sanctions or the negotiations for reparations, or the changes that we would want to see made in a KO and so forth, see that we're not moving unilaterally alone. We need to have the world community come to the same conclusions that we have. We have to be building a coalition, and I, in this regard, want to pay tribute to Foreign Minister Marc Garneau, who at the G7 foreign ministers meeting about a month ago made sure that PS 752 was on the agenda, and that the G7 foreign ministers collectively condemned what had gone on, and made it clear that they did not believe any transparent or comprehensive investigation worth its name had been completed in this case. In other words, Iran had not done what it was obliged to do under the international community. You need to pursue all the steps in the proper order, making sure that you don't mess up your jurisdiction ultimately to get into the International Court of Justice, if that's what this takes. But I believe that Canada needs to be vigorous in leading this effort internationally, and bringing others along with us.
Thank you, High Commissioner, and thank you, Ms. Jacek.
Thank you.
We're now going to move on to the block. We have Mr. Barceau-Duval. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understood earlier from Mr. Tasker's testimony that he was on the ground in Iran, and I imagine he would be the right person to ask this question, but somebody else might wish to respond as well. To what extent are there concerns relative to the safety of people that we send on the ground to investigate in situations like this? Do we have concerns about their security? Are there serious concerns? Do people feel safe when sent on the ground for these investigations? And also, to what extent can those concerns limit your ability to do that work on the ground? I would maybe ask Ms. Van Tempt to answer that question. Well, yes, particularly in this case, our team was deployed as part of a team from the Department of Global Affairs. So we weren't alone. We were assisted because this isn't a usual deployment for us to go to a country like Iran. So it was very specific to Iran. We've had a number of international deployments that haven't necessarily been problematic, but in this particular case, we did have certain concerns, and that's why we went ahead that way. So just a final question for Mr. Goodell. You've been speaking with the families, and if I'm not mistaken, you made a comparison between the Ethiopian Airlines flight and this situation in your report. So what have you learned from speaking to the victims, and how are these two cases similar, given that they didn't happen under the same circumstances?
Mr. Goodell?
Yes, the circumstances, as you point out, were really quite different. But the impact among the victims is really very similar. All of a sudden, loved ones are gone, and there is a huge sense of loss and grieving. And I think the message that I drew out of that in terms of best practices in the government's response and how you move forward is for the government always to put the families of the victims at the center of their response plans. The families will need immediate emergency support. It may be physical, it may be psychological, it may be help with travel, it could be financial. There'll be insurance arrangements to sort out. There will be remains to be repatriated. There's a whole raft of things that just fall on you like a disaster, as this was, and whether it happened because the MAX 8 was defective or it happened because of a shoot down, the trauma for the families is very similar. So as your government is planning how to deal with emergencies, make sure your central focus is the families themselves. And Mr. Chair, if I could just add tangentially here, a thank you to all members of Parliament. On at least 3 occasions, members of the House of Commons have moved unanimously to support resolutions that condemn the perpetrators of this disaster and supported the families. And I believe what I've heard from the families, that they appreciate very, very much that solidarity among members of Parliament to stand foursquare behind them as they pursue justice and truth and transparency and accountability for the dear loved ones they have lost.
Thank you, High Commissioner, and thank you, Mr. Barrasso-Duval. We're now going to move on to the NDP. Mr. Bachrach, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions for Ms. Fox from the TSB. Ms. Fox, you've touched on this a little bit, but back in March, the TSB called for a review of the provisions of Annex 13 of the ICAO Convention to improve transparency in future investigations. Can you explain to the committee why Annex 13 needs a review and improvement to improve transparency?
Ms. Fox.
Mr. Chair, Annex 13 was conceived to facilitate international investigations involving multiple states in the context of a more typical type of aircraft accident, so one where weather, human error, or mechanical issues were a factor. It really wasn't conceived in the context of the shoot down of a civilian airline by a military. And so while it does have provisions, for example, for delegation, which is what happened in the case of MH17, where Ukraine delegated the conduct of the investigation to the Dutch, no state is forced to do that. And so that's the very specific circumstance that we think needs to be looked at.
So my assumption, Ms. Fox, is that the TSB's position is that other states should be granted full status in those investigations. But perhaps you could just lay out what changes you think would improve Annex 13 and address these issues around transparency and conflict of interest, et cetera.
Ms. Fox.
Mr. Chair, as Mr. Tasker's outlined earlier, there may be a variety of ways to improve transparency and credibility, but and we have some ideas. For example, it could be delegation by the state of occurrence to another state, could be creation of some sort of multinational investigation or some sort of third-party neutral observer. But the challenge is that, of course, ICAO is built on the pretext or the principle of sovereignty, and a state has sovereignty over its airspace. So it's difficult in those circumstances to force. I mean, you can't physically force a state to conduct itself in a certain way. So we believe if the states can come together and develop some protocols that would enhance the credibility and transparency, it has a better chance of success going forward.
You got time for a quick question?
I have more time.
Yeah.
I just wonder, to your knowledge, Ms. Fox, has ICAO expressed an interest in improving Annex 13 in the ways that you've mentioned?
Mr. Chair, I'll ask Mr. Tasker to answer that because he was directly involved in presenting that paper.
Mr. Tasker.
Yeah, so thanks, Chair, Madam Chair. So we presented the paper, the working paper, and it was April board reception. So the plan is to create a working group, and that has to yet be approved by the Air Navigation Council. But the concept was favorably looked upon.
Thank you, Mr. Tasker. Thank you, Ms. Fox, and thank you, Mr. Backrack. Folks, that's going to end off our first panel, being 4:48. I want to take this opportunity on behalf of all the members of the committee to thank the High Commissioner, as well as all participants for coming out today and giving us some very valuable information that will most definitely contribute to the report that we're going to be presenting. So with that, I will excuse all and once again give you my sincere appreciation for being here today, and suspend for a few minutes, for 2 minutes, while we make the switch over. Flight PS752 victim. We're going to start off with Hamad Esmailian, the president and spokesperson. Hamad, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Hamad Esmailian, the president and spokesperson of the Association of the Families of Flight PS752 Victims. We represent 142 victims of a mass murder that took 176 lives and an unborn child. I have with me two members of the board of directors, Mr. Kurush Dushanas and Mr. Amir Ali Alavi, from our Government and Stakeholder Relations Committee. I appear before you with a heavy, broken heart. I will not ask you to put yourself in my place. You cannot, and I will not be so cruel to ask. 17 months have passed, but we, the survivors, remain frozen in 3 minutes and 42 seconds, the time between when the first missile was fired and flight PS752 crashed to the ground. With the passing of time, we sink deeper and deeper into silent sorrow, but our resolve has strengthened. Meetings, writings, rallies, petitions, interviews, complaints, whatever we could do and plead to be done. We live in darkness. We are the victims of unfathomable evil and wickedness that ripped our loved ones from our embrace. The victims of terrorism don't have it easy. Some, like us, are put in a position to prove that it was terrorism. Without our government, we have no recourse to bring the perpetrators of this inhumane crime to justice. We have no recourse other than to plead with politicians to remain focused on revealing the truth and justice. We are in darkness. Why was the airspace left open on that fateful dark winter morning, or who in the highest ranks of the regime made the decision? Why and how were at least 2 missiles fired at the civilian aircraft? No one asked why the Canadian passports and other belongings of the passengers were confiscated, willfully allowed to be looted and stolen. No one at the ICAO raised their voice, while every article of their conventions and annexes were breached by the Iranian government. No one at the ICAO raised their voice against the mockery and blatant obscurantism in the shambolic reports published by the very perpetrators of the crime, who were led to investigate their own crimes. It seems as if an entire airplane has been lost in the clouds of international diplomacy and credulity. human error, systemic failure, a lone tired foot soldier who made a mistake, radars oriented in the wrong direction, broken communication lines, convenient lies disguised as mistakes and incompetence to whitewash willful murder. The past 17 months have been unbearable for us. We have been traumatized by the relentless psychological war unleashed upon us by the Islamic regime and their sympathizers, some of whom find Canada as a safe haven to operate in. All we hear is that we must wait. Compensation is not our priority. We have repeated this over and over again. Without the truth, there will be no justice. And without holding the perpetrators and commanders to account, justice will have no meaning whatsoever. After 17 months, we remain unclear about the path to the truth. There is no roadmap to justice or a strategy with a timeline. Had the world acted meaningfully in the aftermath of the MH17 mass murder, PS752 may not have happened. And now, if we don't act meaningfully for PS752, more innocent lives will be lost. Our demands are clear. Canada must take active leadership to mobilize the 5 affected countries. Canada must drag the ICAO out of its timid passiveness, disguised as neutrality. A criminal investigation and legal proceedings must be launched in Canada. The PS752 case must be taken to every relevant international tribunal that can hold the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to account, reveal the truth, and bring the perpetrators to justice. The IRGC must be included in the list of terrorist organizations, and the Magnitsky Act must be applied to commanders of the IRGC and other perpetrators of this crime. Since I began my address to you, honorable members of our parliament, another 3 minutes and 42 seconds have passed. Canada lost 85 permanent residents and citizens. Dozens of talented academic minds were silenced forever. This Canadian tragedy can only be confronted with a clear roadmap to justice. We can only hope for that day. Thank you for your interest in hearing us today. We welcome your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ismailian. Members, we're going to go right into questions. We have, starting off with the Conservatives for 6 minutes. Ms. Kusi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Ismailian, for your touching testimony there. I want to first offer my sympathies and my condolences to the families of the victims of PS 752. As a wife and as a mother, I cannot comprehend what you have been through. Mr. Ismailian, you mentioned justice in your opening statement. Of course, the downing of PS 752 was a horrible tragedy and was devastating for the families of the victims. And the families of the victims from PS 752 deserve justice and deserve answers for what happened that fateful evening. What do the families need to see from the Government of Canada to feel as though justice has been served?
Mr. Ismailian?
I think we need to see a strategy. We need to see a clear roadmap. That 17 months has passed, and as I said, we still are in the darkness. We don't know anything about that flight. We don't know the reason of the delay. We don't know if the passengers were taken off the plane or not before boarding. We don't know why they asked the Canadian citizens if they have so these questions must be answered. And I want my friend, Mr. Duchenos, to add more if you can. Thank you.
Mr. Duchenos, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Hamid. I appreciate the question. When we're talking to the officials, we talk to all who have a stake in this tragedy, we always ask, we want to know the truth. We want to know the justice. We want to get the justice for our loved ones. And, we had a hard time to explain to everyone from the very beginning, past 15, 16, 17 months now, the compensation is not what we want. That's not priority for us. The truth and justice to allow us to have a sense of closure in our life. Without that, we cannot go on. Our life is being destroyed. I lost my partner, Dr. Fru Khadem. She was a wonderful person. She was academic. She was a fantastic, career, and she just went for a holiday to meet her family. She didn't deserve to die like that with all the other people on the board of that plane. That's not acceptable. Canada cannot accept this as another things just happen. This was by no means was an accident. There was absolutely zero evidence this has been just an accident. Every evidence we have seen through all these past few months, it's direct us to think this has been some element of intentionality. And without having a proper criminal investigation in Canada, and RCMP early on, we don't know why RCMP has decided they cannot open a criminal investigation in Canada. 176 dead bodies. I think there is enough reason to start a criminal investigation. I understand they may not have access to all the evidence in Iran, but that should not be a reason not to open the criminal investigation. Thank you.
Ms. Kusi?
Do you have anything to add to that, Mr. Alavi?
Mr. Alavi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my friends here covered most of the things. I will add, however, that this is not about justice and truth for the families only. This is much greater than that. It is also about standing up for Canada as a country. It is about stopping a ruthless regime from taking the lives of innocent world citizens. Canada needs to know about the reports of Iranian airport authorities screening out people who hold American passports. They asked specifically every passenger whether they have American passports, having in mind that this was an intentional, premeditated attack, according to the evidence that we have on the balance of probabilities. Why should the Iranian regime care about American lives, but not those of the Canadians? What we need to see from our government now in response to horrific mass murder is a plan. We need to take leadership in the world, condemn Iran at ICAO. We need to build alliances and coalitions to press the Iranian regime to put this the truth and justice for PS752 as a priority in all talks, including the JCPOA talks. We need to take Iran to International Court of Justice, expedite the negotiation process. We need to start a criminal investigation in Canada, issue travel advisory like what was done for the case in Belarus, impose targeted Magnitsky sanctions on individuals who were responsible, and list the IRGC as a terrorist entity, and unequivocally reject the fabricated scenario of human error once and for all. This is all the response of the government following the release of the forensic report is crucial. And what we need to see here is a focused and comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alavi, and thank you, Ms. Kusi.
Thank you all.
We're now going to move on to our next set of questions from the Liberals. Mr. Assassi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ismailian, Mr. Alavi, Mr. Duchenos. I can't possibly ever imagine how difficult it has been over the past year and a half. Every step of the way, the Iranian government has been acting with impunity, and that has barred you from knowing what the facts of the case are. Today, we heard from Ms. Fox. She is a technical expert, and she actually prepared notes on Iran's draft report. Now, you know full well that the final report that was released, in your own words, is shambolic. Would you like it if Ms. Fox's report was released so you would have more access to the facts?
Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Assassi. Absolutely. We need to know what was sent to TSP from Ukraine, because Ukraine, as a country of the owner of the airplane, they had access to some information that was shared with TSB. And we need to have an access to that. We need to know when Mr. Tasker went to Iran, what did he find? He said in this testimony today that he had a chance to go to the crash site. But what did he see in the crash site? Everything was looted. Everything was bulldozed away. So I think in their press conference and in their report to the public, they had to mention that. They had to mention that Iran had breached every single regulation in Annex 13. And they had to say that Iran's airspace is not safe. I've heard from Ms. Fax that it's not in his, she's not in the position to say that. But as Mr. Goodell said today, Iran's airspace is not safe, and that's the TSB's job and the air safety organization to point to that. Thank you.
Mr. El-Sassi.
Thank you for that. Now, there have been terrible things that have happened over the course of the past year and a half. One thing I'm obviously well aware of is how you have been intimidated in Canada. All of you have been intimidated. Would you mind explaining to the members of this committee what has happened here on Canadian soil?
Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Saucy. It's not just me. There are 12 family members in Canada. They have been intimidated and harassed and threatened. And imagine what they do in Iran. Imagine what they do with the family members in Iran. We saw the Human Rights Watch report on 27th of May that at least one family member was tortured in Iran. So they have like a cyber army, and they use it in different social media platforms, and they send us messages from fake and real accounts. We have shared that information with RCMP. Kurosh mentioned RCMP before, and I think we need to see something, the outcome of this investigation, what they have done, and especially in the criminal case. If we don't open the criminal case here, if we don't put everything together like as a comprehensive job, I think we can't find the truth, and we can't like teach them a lesson that they can't interfere with Canadian citizens here in Canada.
Mr. Sassy, you're on mute, Ellie.
Any of the other two witnesses, would you like to add to that?
Gentlemen.
Hamed spoke for me as well. I won't take more time.
Thank you.
I don't have anything to add on that one. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Sassy.
And in terms of priorities, what would you say your priority is right now as an association?
Gentlemen.
You know, as I mentioned before, we had some demands. We needed to, we are waiting for the forensic report from Canada. I think it's going to be out probably next week. But after this report is out, we have to speak clearly that the downing of PS752 was not an accident, was not a mistake, was not a human error, was not a systemic failure. We have to get to the point. And so we all of us, we saw Belarus. It came out as an example today. And we like that all the countries, they worked in a group to put a sanction on the airspace of Belarus. And I'm happy that no passengers on Ryanair died. But here we have 176 victims with no answers. So speaking clearly after the report is out, putting IRGC in a terrorist list, Magnitsky Act, and leading these 5 countries in a very difficult and long journey to justice, I think it's very important.
Thank you, Mr. Asmilian. Mr. Sassy, go ahead. Mr. Sassy?
Yes. Did anyone of the other two witnesses want to add to that?
Gentlemen?
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair, and you know, the history is shown, all these 42 years, you can negotiate and you can be expecting any outcome, positive outcome with a country who absolutely have zero regards for human rights, international treaties, and basically violate every norm with impunity. And then, unfortunately, one of the biggest battles we had to educate a lot of people. When they promise you they're going to do something, or they're not just simply, they don't say no to you, it doesn't mean they're going to do something for you. Early on, we spoke to TSP and said, look, why don't you put further pressure on investigative team and put more pressure, even through the ICAO's Annex 13. And they say, look, we're asking to get a higher designation. They haven't said no to us. It's just like they're dangling this carrot in front of these basically officials. And by just saying no, you're almost hoping they're going to say yes. But that never happens. That never, ever had happened in 42 years of diplomacy with this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alavi?
Thank you. I won't take more time on this question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alavi. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Sassy as well. Great question. I'm going to move on to the block. Mr. Barcelona, you have 6 minutes.
Merci. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think that before I start asking questions, I'd like to take a little time to present my condolences to the families of the victims of the tragedy of PS 752. As somebody said earlier, it's hard to imagine being in your position under the circumstances, but despite that, I think that we all know what it's like to lose people that are close to us, and I think we can all agree that without being able to be in your place, we stand in solidarity with you and in these extremely challenging times that you've faced. And so I am wholeheartedly with you in this very difficult time. I'd like to know to what extent the Association of Families of Flight PS 752 victims, what how much time do you put into the association? How much place does it take in your life, and how much work has that meant for you?
If I,
Gentlemen.
Mr. Chair, if I may answer that one.
Mm-hmm.
This has become our full-time, basically, life. We do everything. In the morning we get up, and till the night we sleep.
Actually, it should be fine.
And what we do, we are just doing everything to make sure we push this a little bit more every day forward. Make sure they keep it alive. Make sure people are not forgetting. Make sure educate some people who don't know what had happened. And what as my responsibility as a chair of a committee for government and stakeholders of association, myself, Amir Ali and Hamid, we have been meeting every officials you can imagine who has anything to do with this. We have met with the ministers, we have met with the prime minister, we have met with the recently commissioner of RCMP. We have met everyone you can even imagine had anything to do with it in Canada and also around the world, in Sweden and also in UK. We have all, of course, done through this meeting like this one. And meanwhile, what we were grieving, and we had to deal with the COVID-19 situation, we had to organize ourselves early on and basically put our griefs on the one corner and start to do this. And then no one should be put in a situation like that. And the reason we had to do this, we had to work as an advocacy group and basically for working through all of this grieving. The way the operation, this regime has been operated past 42 years, they're going to find a way to wiggle their room out of it. And unfortunately, so far, they have been able to not be answering properly to all the questions being posed at them. And there is no condemnation from anywhere. I mean, what does it take to ICAO to come out and condemning them for breach of their own Annex 13? Or they don't even respect their own Annex 13 when a country doesn't even basically they're supposed to do that. So what it takes to take this to them and put pressure on them. And you know what? This is surprising for us. Even our RCMP has been a hard time to open an investigation. We didn't say you take them to court. We said, look, start the investigation to see if you can take them to international court or domestic court. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duchanas. Mr. Barceau-Duval, go ahead.
J'ai certainement d'autres questions.
I certainly have some other questions, but I'm not sure if the other witnesses wanted to add anything to my initial question.
I just can add that thank you for your question. This is a full-time job for me. I'm a dentist. I was a dentist before this. So me and my wife, both, we had a clinic in Aurora, and I'm sitting in my office right now. But as you see, I've changed the office as an operation office for PS752. So yeah, this is my new life, I think.
Mr. Alavi, do you have any comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. As with Mr. Duchanas and Mr. Ismailian, I think for all of us in the association, our lives have changed, and within the association, we are in contact with the families of over 140 victims, and I can tell you that the Iranian regime did not only take the lives of 176 victims, they took the lives of so many thousands of people who were, all the families who are now devastated, who feel oppressed, who feel helpless. And this is the reason why we keep going every day, meetings, letters, and we appear before you to answer your questions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Peut-être.
Thank you. What I've understood from your testimony is that this really has taken over your lives, and I greatly admire your devotion to move forward under these circumstances. And if you've invested so much time into it, I know that's because you want to make sure that you've done everything you can to and have the best chance to make sure that we get answers. So I'd like to know, since you've met with so many people, have you felt that these meetings have made a difference? And do you have the feeling that if you were to stop putting pressure on various people, that this might fall by the wayside? Does that also explain why you put so much effort and time into it?
I think Koresh can answer this question. Thank you.
Thank you for a question. Of course, we believe we have made definitely a positive effect, and we have been able to be influencing many minds. In fact, when I was listening to High Commissioner Goodell today, it was wonderful to hear him exactly repeating what we have been saying all these years, all these months. And he's very familiar with what we want and our demands on this file and what is expected from. And, when Mr. Yarorsky was here answering some questions, when we started talking to him, when our fact-finding committee of our association started to work with him, this is all make a huge difference. When we started, everybody was talking about human error. We had to correct that. Everybody was talking about accident. We had to correct that. Everyone was talking about compensation. We had to correct that. Then we started hearing systemic error. We had to correct that. We have done so much of work to educate and make a correction of the language and the stance what different officials have been dealing with and saying over the many months. And we are happy to see our work has been resulted to someone today here meeting with you. And you know what? It was a heartwarming for us on June 17 last year, when yourself, all the honorable MPs unanimously passed a motion to, regardless of a government of the day, to continue finding the truth and justice for victims of PS 752. You have no idea when the parliament acts and unanimously acts outside the partisanship, how effective you are in our hearts and minds. And we appreciate everything you have done so far. And we command you, we request you, we ask you, please continue do whatever you can do best. Make sure you continue your oversight, continue ask questions. Because as Amirali said before, it's not just for our families, this is for every Canadian. Every Canadian should have a safety and ability to travel without being killed or put in prison or whatever else is happening to the Canadian nowadays in other countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duchanas, and thank you, Mr. Barso-Duval. Great questions. Mr. Floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I too would like to start by joining my colleagues in expressing my sincere condolences to all of the families of the victims of PS 752, and to thank the three gentlemen who have taken the time to be with us today and to answer our questions. I want to thank you for your courage and your persistence in the pursuit of justice, and hearing your answers to my colleague, Mr. Barsalou-Duval's questions about how this has transformed your lives. It's a tremendous thing that you're doing in helping educate people and pushing for the answers, pushing the government to do the right thing. If I've heard you correctly, it sounds like your impression is that the government of Canada has been too passive in its advocacy at ICAO. Is that an accurate impression? And how would you like to see Canada's approach change when it comes to call for stronger action by ICAO?
Gentlemen?
I think, yes, what we have done in ICAO has not been satisfying for the families. 17 months passed. We waited 15 months for Iran's final report. And as we mentioned before, nobody said anything in ICAO about the breaches. And compare that to Ryanair. That's a good example. And other thing, for example, we have Iran has a representative in ICAO, Mr. Farhad Parvarish. This person was one of the first people who denied shooting an airplane. This person has been in contact with IRGC and GOATS Force in the past. There are documents supporting that. But he is in Montreal here in Canada, ICAO here in Montreal in Canada. And it's unbelievable for us, for an organization that we are hosting, acting so passively towards PS 752. For Ryanair, they had an urgent meeting. They didn't have even one urgent meeting about PS 752. ICAO Council has 36 members, and Canada is one of the main members of ICAO. So I wanted to forget the past and just talk about future today. And I think now, these 17 months passed, but we still have the chance to raise this case in ICAO. Minister Al Gabra going to have a speech. Is going to have a speech on 18th of June, I think in 8 days, and I'm very anxious to see what he says there.
Thank you, Mr. Ismailian. I appreciate your response. On May 20th, there was a decision by the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. I wonder if you could help the committee understand the significance of that decision.
I will pass it to Amirali.
Mr. Alabi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your question. Well, this was an important milestone in our fight, in our cause, and we have been saying for a long time that based on the evidence that is available to us, that the plane was not shut down due to a human error. It was for sure something more than that. There has to be more than that. It was not as simple as just pushing a button and 2 missiles being fired. And this was all based on evidence. This is based on how the TORAM-1 anti-air missile system works. This is based on how the aviation and airport management system in Iran works. This is based on a lot of other factors. And we had a chance through this case to have our case heard by an impartial judge. And we were glad that the judge, Justice Alba, made the same finding that on the balance of probabilities, based on the evidence that we have available to us, this was a terrorist act, this was an intentional downing, and we need to treat it as such. It is not simply an aviation incident. It is a terrorist attack, and we need to take actions that match the same level of culpability.
Thank you, Mr. Alavi. Mr. Bachrach?
Yeah, thank you for that response, Mr. Alavi. Now, to any of our 3 witnesses, this next question, in his report, High Commissioner Goodale stated that, quote, the needs of the families of the victims, as those families themselves perceive their needs, must be at the heart of Canada's response. Do you gentlemen feel that that has been the case?
Gentlemen?
You're asking about the court case, you mean, yes?
No, sorry. This is in High Commissioner Goodale's report. He talked about the needs of the families and the importance of putting those needs and the families perceived as they perceive those needs, putting those at the heart of Canada's response to this tragedy. Do you feel that Canada has done a good job of putting your needs at the heart of the response?
I think we have had ups and downs with like meeting officials. We have had good days. So as Kurush said, we have had very good meetings with Mr. Goodale, with Mr. Champagne in the past. In some meetings, we get really disappointed when we finish the meeting. But in some meetings, we think, okay, we got something from this meeting. But as I said, still the roadmap for justice is not clear for us. We know that this is a very long, difficult way. But for example, as Mr. Goodale said, there is going to be negotiation, then arbitration, ICAO, and it's going to, if it fails, it goes to International Court of Justice. But we don't know anything about this negotiation. We know that Iran is not a player in the game of diplomacy. We know that Iran has failed in all the negotiations that had in the past, like JCPOA right now. And that's why we are very suspicious about Iran's actions on negotiation. And we need to know more. What's the strategy and what's the roadmap for future? Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Folks, we have 4 minutes left before 5:30. And I don't want to really take some time away from anybody. So I'm going to propose this. We have, in our second round, we have a few speakers that are on my list here. May I suggest that Mr. Von Popta, as well as Mr. Iacono, Mr. Barceau-Duval, and Mr. Bachrach, all ask one question, one after another, and then I'm going to allow the witnesses to close it out. So I'm going to start off with Mr. Von Popta. Mr. Von Popta, if you want to ask a question, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Iacono following you, and then Mr. Barceau-Duval, Mr. Bachrach.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for giving me at least a minute. I'm going to take some of my time just to express my condolences and to stand with my colleagues in doing so for the victims, and thanking the witnesses for being with us here today. It must be very difficult for you. I cannot imagine what you were going through, but please know that Canada's parliamentarians stand with you. Mr. Goodale, in his report, said that investigation is ongoing, but for that, we need facts, we need evidence, we need data. Are you at all confident that we're ever going to get that, given that Iran is not cooperating?
Thank you, Mr. Van Popta. Mr. Iacono, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to start with offering to all the families affected by this tragedy my heartfelt sympathies. Losing a loved one is never easy. To the families, do you think that the public pressure, either domestically or internationally, has any effect on the Iranian regime? And what other type of pressure would you suggest at this point? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Iacono. Mr. Bachrach, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my last question, we've heard discussion about sanctions such as Magnitsky sanctions. I'm wondering how our witnesses feel that such sanctions would help in the pursuit of justice.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Barceau-Duval, go ahead.
Merci.
Thank you. And thank you to the witnesses for appearing before us today. I greatly appreciated your testimony. And so the question that I would have for you is, well, I heard you speak of your insatisfaction because you would have preferred to see the RCMP start an investigation. Concretely, what would that change if the RCMP were to start an investigation, and what could the RCMP concretely do under the circumstances?
Thank you, Mr. Barceau-Duval. Gentlemen, the rest of the time is all yours. If you want to address those questions and any other comments you want to add, feel free.
Thank you. I answered the first three questions, and I leave the fourth one for my friends. So, in our opinion, Iran is not going to tell the truth. If there's no pressure, and we think that they're so afraid of going to International Court of Justice. So only pressure can help us. I just want to clarify something. We are talking about two different entities, Iran and Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran is a great country with great people, but the Islamic Republic of Iran is the hostage taker of a nation for 42 years. We are dealing with Iran, Islamic Republic of Iran, with the history that all of us know. So they haven't said the truth about all the crimes that have committed in the last 42 years. Blood in November happened right 40 days before PS 752, and hundreds of people died in Iran, got killed by IRGC. So when we say sanctions, we don't want to pressure Iranian people. That's why we are talking about targeted sanctions. Magnitsky Act, and IRGC in a terrorist list. Just freeze their assets in Canada. Canada should not be a safe haven for Islamic Republic criminals. Like deport Farhad Parvez from Montreal to Iran. This person doesn't deserve to live in Canada. I think we need to, as I said in my opening, we need to teach them a lesson that it's not easy to kill Canadians. I leave the rest of the questions and answers to Emily.
Thank you, Mr. Hasmelian. Gentlemen, if you want
to... let me answer the question regarding RCMP. Why we ask a criminal investigation file to be open in Canada, that would allow us to have a way of getting justice. When the victims have no way of seeking justice, what else we've left? It just, people start to thinking about revenge. Revenge is not the same as justice, but in absence of finding a venue to have that kind of a justice delivered to the people who are victims, it's very important. And we understand RCMP doesn't have all the evidence now, but every other day I read, in fact, yesterday I was reading a newspaper, we're talking about a cold case after 30 years was solved. If you don't have an open case, even become a cold case, eventually the evidence will come to surface. People travel outside Iran, they could be subpoenaed. They could be asked and forced to answer questions. So in absence of having any active investigation, how do you know you have enough evidence or you don't? And you're prejudging that by completely pushing it aside. If you ask what is our main goal and what is our association main ask is today, I guarantee you that would be the ask. Asking RCMP open the file, open the criminal investigation without delay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Duchanas. We're now going to move on to Mr. Alavi. Mr. Alavi, closing comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In closing, I will answer most of these 4 questions broadly. We know that probably not all of the truth will be revealed, no matter how much pressure we will put on Iran. But it is important to put that pressure to pursue Iran at whatever venue that we have available to us, through whatever tool that we have available to us, to have as much of the truth as possible. I spoke about having focused on and plan to respond to the downing of flight PS752, and having a criminal investigation opened by the RCMP will be part of it. This will send a signal. This, through an investigation, as my friend Mr. Duchanas was talking, we can set a reward for information. We already have informants reaching out to us through our association. We have no way of validating the evidence that they are trying to give us. We need the RCMP's help. The RCMP can go much further than that. We can have people interviewed. We can establish more closer connection with the Ukrainian law enforcement authorities, who are also conducting a criminal investigation. We need to help the Ukrainians and take leadership on this case. And lastly, I think it was asked about public pressure, whether it has any effect on the regime. The public pressure does have an effect on the regime. In fact, this is the only thing that they are scared of. And more than that, the coalition that the like-minded countries can have is also scary to the regime, and that will force them to reveal as much of the truth that we can get out of Iran. There are so many talks that are being done with Iran. Canada needs to take leadership. Canada needs to talk to the other countries to put the PS752 case as a priority on all of those, because this is a human right violation. This is a lot more than that too. But this is not just related to Canada. This goes for all the world, and we really need to see leadership and focused, comprehensive plan by the government. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of you gentlemen for coming out today, Mr. Ismailian, Mr. Duchanas, and Mr. Alavi. Your time today is absolutely priceless. And I do want to say on behalf of all members and repeat what most have already said, that our hearts are just so heavy and have been since that dreadful day. And with that, words alone can never, ever convey the sorrow of all Canadians. And with that, the best we can say is that we stand with you. All 338 members of Parliament together stand with you in these days. And as one member mentioned today, it's something that we can never imagine what you've been going through and what you're going through now. So with that, again, our sincerest appreciation for your attendance today. And of course your interventions, which will be most definitely part of the final report that we'll present to the House. So once again, I want to thank you for that. And to the members as well, for your participation today. Great work, great job. And to the panel earlier, thank you for their time. And with that, members, I will bid you a good night and adjourn this meeting. Thank you.